wonderful backgrounds from R&D through to production into our discussion today. So as you all know, certification and safety are very important topics in the aerospace sector. Our industry is moving towards qualifying more parts and processes. And we're also looking at figuring out how to enable safety procedures across the value stream. So we're going to dive into how we're enabling that in additive and how does that differ across other types of technologies. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A tab and upvote your favorite questions so we can get to them. And in the meantime, I will allow Elena and William to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about how you guys are supporting certification and safety in aerospace sector. Elena, want to start? Oh, she's gone. William, you want to start?
Hey, good afternoon, Janet. Thank you for the introduction. Good to see you again. Good afternoon, everyone who's participating in this great event, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. A little bit about me and Collins Aerospace and where we are. So as Janet mentioned, I have the pleasure of leading a central operations organization of about 15 folks here at Collins Aerospace, and we are focused on servicing our internal customers, right? So servicing, excuse me, the 6 strategic business units that make up Collins Aerospace. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar with Collins Aerospace, we're a very large tier 1 supplier to the OEMs in the aerospace and defense industry, right? The Boeings, the Airbuses, the Bombardiers, people like that industry, companies like that who are actually producing, the frames, the aircraft. And so those 6 strategic business units have really a wide range of products. And so our focus is on enabling their efforts in additive manufacturing. And you can imagine certifying perhaps, main landing gear on a wide body commercial jet would be very different than certifying, some interior seats and things like that. And so it's really, one of the benefits, one of the pleasures that I have in my role is working with such a diverse group of products and really understanding how all those products not only get designed and manufactured, but more to the topical point today of how they get certified. So I'm looking forward to this conversation for the next 45 minutes or so.
For that. And I know Elena Lopez is trying to get back on the stage, so our Community Natives team can re-enable her. Wonderful, perfect timing. Elena, you want to introduce yourself as well after William's wonderful intro?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the inconvenience. I had just a small problem. Yeah, my name is Elena Lopez. I work as division manager for additive manufacturing at the Fraunhofer Institute for Material and Beam Technology in Dresden, Germany, in the east part of Germany. And I'm a chemical engineer, and we do have contact, obviously, with some aerospace projects. So I'm very happy to be here and tell about our experience as an industrial research institute.
Introducing yourself. You just mentioned Bill or Will in this conversation?
It's Bill, Janet.
Bill.
It's okay.
Okay, cool. So Bill, you mentioned there's different certification processes, for a seat versus a landing gear. Elena, you're also at Fraunhofer helping companies get to that level as well. Can you guys share a little bit about, if someone wants to start qualifying a part, what is the typical process that they need to consider and some of the pitfalls that folks might forget about that they should definitely have on their radar when planning for such a program? Bill, you want to get started with that?
Yeah, so that's great, Janet. Thank you. So the biggest issue for us is really about communication. And what I mean by that is we like to make sure that we start communicating not only with the customer, again, the Boeings, the Airbuses, the Lockheed Martins, et cetera, but also with the regulatory agencies, whether that be, in Europe, EASA, or here in the States, the FAA, to really understand what is going to be required to certify that part or that system. And I think that's really, you mentioned, Janet, what are some of the pitfalls? I think one of the things that we would advise is that, if you can do that early on in the process, it makes the entire process go that much easier. As we can all imagine, I'm sure we've had experiences where you start down a path and you kind of think you know where you're headed, but when you get there, you realize that you may have missed something. And so with respect to certification, understanding what those requirements are going to be at the end certainly helps design the process, can help our company really make sure that we're gathering the right data, the right intelligence, making sure that we're conducting the right tests, and really going through the process as the customer and the regulatory body would require. So again, for us, it's like I said, key to communicate upfront as early as possible.
Elena, do you agree? Is communication, obviously communication is important, but are there certain angles of communication or ways to communicate that could help you bring out the right information for this decision-making process that you might have a perspective on from Fraunhofer's point of view?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Bill. We see these communication problems also from the European point of view with the agencies that you need to work with. They do communicate in a different way or have different paces. What we do see also from the industrial projects is that it's also you need to count with a quite huge amount of time from the inquiry of a certain technology readiness level of your part or the project you are aiming up to the final certification or time where your part is flying. So we have learned from some projects that sometimes it takes years, definitely, from company feasibility study beginning up to the really certified part to reach this the L9, for instance. So you need to be patient, and even if the technical issues are already behind you and everything is working right, from the laboratory work in AM part up to the certified and fatigue proof and safety proof part, it's a long time. So as far as or as soon as you can start also communicating the needs and communicating maybe the advantages of what additive is bringing into this part, you will gain definitely time and a good understanding also with the partners or with the certification agencies.
Janet, if I may, I want to capture something that Elena said. I think she said it so well, but there was one word in there that she said that resonated with me so much, and that is patience. She used the word patience, and I couldn't agree more. I think we have to be patient. We have to understand that for all of the fantastic development that's gone on in the additive industry over the last 5, 10, 15 years, that we are obviously not nearly as mature from a technology development perspective as some of the conventional manufacturing technologies, and therefore certification will take longer, right? It can take extended periods versus maybe what we're typically used to. So Elena, that word is amazing. It was just great to hear you say patience. So I wanted to just touch on that.
And regarding to patience, just to help everyone frame, for different certification programs that you've seen, what is the fastest program versus the longest program, just so that we understand and calibrate how much patience we need when we're embarking on this curve?
Janet, I'll say, we probably think in terms of, months and years, right? Not anything less than that. We've got a couple of products that are going through testing now with the customer, and that takes time. That takes thousands of flight hours and things like that. So we like I said, I think we think in terms of a year at least. And then again, for more complex or flight safety, flight critical parts, it can probably scale from there. On the short end, again, given our product portfolio, we do everything down to and including, making, if you will, you're in seat 2A, if you will. So obviously, certifying, if you will, that part is a much different process than certifying, something more structural. So again, we span the gamut, and it can be as short as, if it's a decorative or non-critical part, a very short amount of time to well in excess of a year, and rightfully so, right? I think we would all agree that despite wanting it to be faster, wanting it to be quicker, we all understand the need for these parts to make sure that they're absolutely as safe and as functioning as possible, and to make sure that when people get on board an aircraft, it performs exactly as it's expected to. So while we all are impatient at times and wish things would move faster, I think there's a good reason for remembering to be patient and remembering that things with respect to additive are going to take a little bit longer than our conventionally manufactured product.
To add there, Elena?
Yeah, sure. I would say, yeah, my experience is also concerns years more than months. So it's really years. Maybe the most extreme example I can mention is a research project that we had with Rolls-Royce and microstructures made by Additive DED, where we have been working for almost 12 years, so from the very, very beginning, where these microstructures working as clamping structures between metal and thermal barrier coaters in engines. We're not really there. We're never never done before. We are talking about microns clamping structures, up to the really certification and inclusion or really flying in Airbus machines. So it took 12 years really from this very fundamental research up to the launching in Airbus machines. It was a long way, it was a satisfactory way, but it's just maybe an extreme example of how long it can take, but definitely ensuring safety.
On this topic, we have a question that rose to the top from our audience members. What are the key standards for AM process certification in aerospace industry?
Janet, I think if that's okay, I'll lead with that one. Right now, additive manufacturing is considered a special process, specifically welding, and I'm obviously speaking to like a process like laser powder bed fusion. And so the NADCAP certification is certainly key. As we industrialize some of our processes around additive, again, specifically laser powder bed, we recognize that achieving the NADCAP certification will be critical for us and what our customers will look for. So certainly that. Obviously, at the foundation of any aerospace manufacturing is the AS 9100 Rev D standard. And so again, that's sort of the quality standard upon which everything is founded. And then from there, as I mentioned, we'll look for the NADCAP certification on top of that.
In the European market, Elena?
Yeah, definitely we need to look at the standards that are applied here in the different countries, because it's usually also different approach depending on the countries. I do like to mention usually the work from the ASTM as international approach, because they are collecting always the different standards and comparing them with each other. So this is a nice place to look at, to have an impression of the different levels that are being used in each country, without going into too much into the detail.
Those are definitely key standards to look at. When we're talking about qualifying parts, there's a lot of folks talking about qualifying and certifying parts for a family of parts, and making flexible design allowables. Are there certain pros and cons for going one path versus another? Is there a best practice today that we should all consider? Elena, you want to start with that one?
I don't know if I got you right exactly with that question, but if you mentioned if we consider one part or a family of parts from the quality point of view, right? So I mean, obviously, if with additive manufacturing you can do different changes in design, in the function with relative less effort than with conventional manufacturing. So it's easier, let's say, to take a look at some modifications in the design to achieve further functionalization of one part. So you can be more creative, let's say, even for aerospace, if you need to consider the safety and the standards. But obviously we do use also in projects slight modifications that can be achieved by additive manufacturing to be more creative with the parts, not to add some value, added value on top of one previous design. I hope that I got your question right. Otherwise, I will let William to give his interpretation on that.
So I want to make sure, like you, Elena, that I understand. So Janet, I think we're asking, is there a difference in certifying a single part versus certifying a family of parts? Is that what we're getting at? Okay. Well, I guess Janet, I would say, I don't have from an additive perspective, right? We at Collins don't have experience yet at certifying families of parts, right? So we are, like I said, we have some experience about certifying individual parts. but we haven't approached anything from an additive perspective, certifying part families yet. So it's a little bit difficult for me to speak with any experience. So I guess though what I would offer is that again, Elena said, making sure that we understand what the different countries and what they will require. I think as the industry matures, right, and we move from individual part certification into certifying families of parts, that's when I think that timeline will start to shrink and reduce as we start flying more flight certified flight critical parts. The first heat exchanger, while novel and fantastic, hopefully in 2 to 3 years that will just be sort of a lot more commonplace. And so I think it will come to pass that we'll become more comfortable certifying families as we demonstrate success certifying the individual component. So I think it kind of gets back to that that thought process of gaining comfortableness, gaining maturity, and making sure that we communicate, as Elena mentioned, with the different regulatory agencies. So again, more to come on that, I think, as the industry matures, but I think that's kind of our approach to the families versus individual parts at this point.
Thank you for that. And on that note of certifying parts, Michael Pacoda from our audience asks, how are certified parts entering traditional supply chains? And are there any roadblocks of AM components facing inside those supply chains today?
So maybe I will comment on that. Obviously, the whole manufacturing process chain, you need to consider the whole chain and also the technology you're using for these aerospace parts. We have seen in the past that if you're talking about DED, for instance, it's quite usual that the companies do have already some DED machines there that they can already use as maybe for repaired in the past or some cladding, something like that. So they just need to do some kind of upgrade of the machine to work on a 3D modus, let's say. So this is a slightly change concerning the equipment, I would say. Now you need to change your mind in additive and maybe do some training of the people concerning the design possibilities that are open there for 3D. But obviously, if you're looking for parts that are commonly powder bed based, and your company is has no experience with that, it's a huge investment, definitely, and you need to consider maybe to outsource that. If you just have one part or a couple of parts, it might be more convenient to work with some service dealer in that case. Or if you're aiming to integrate powder bed technologies, maybe to increase the scope of parts that can be made by powder bed, then it could be interesting to build up with your own equipment, right? So probably you need to concern or take care of the whole process chain and see if you are just trying a couple of parts with AM or you are so sure that this is the technology for you, and then an investment could make sense, definitely. That's just a comment. I'm really excited what Bill would say about that. But
yeah, so for us at Collins Aerospace, our industrialization strategy around additive manufacturing consists both of make parts and buy parts. And when you compare that, again, against the traditional supply chain, right now I would say we are much more comfortable in the traditional manufacturing methods with buy parts than perhaps we are with additive. We're a little bit more conservative right now with our approach to additive, make versus buy, where we're going to probably lean, at least at the outset, more toward the make than the buy. We do have some wonderful suppliers, though. I don't want to slight them at all. We've got some great suppliers that we're working currently with. We couldn't be more happy with that relationship. But as we really start to industrialize, our value stream, right, and our place in the value stream, we will lean more towards make than buy at the outset. But just like conventional, right, I know that we will become more comfortable with looking to the supply chain as the additive industry matures. And so I would expect that at some point in the future, additive will look very much like its conventional counterparts, and we will probably be more of a buy than a make. But again, it will take time for us to get there. And it will take time for the industry to get there. There are a number of parts that we will make because we're not convinced that perhaps the supply chain can offer those parts to us right now. But again, as the industry grows, as suppliers increase their capabilities, as we increase our capabilities, I do expect that make-buy to shift and probably, like I said, look more like it does today on the conventional side.
Speaking of make, Bill, you did mention that you guys are launching a new facility in Singapore. My question for you is, what are the challenges for designing a safe facility? What are the processors or considerations for launching into a new environment where you might not be familiar with all the local laws?
Sure. Well, other than the challenge of it's 12 hours off my time zone, so I have to stay up really late to talk to my team. There are a number of challenges, but I'd say one of the things that we've been really blessed with is a great host country, right? The government of Singapore has been a tremendous partner for us for a number of years, and continues to be. And so a few years ago, we were quite ecstatic to announce what we called an innovation hub, in partnership with the Singapore Economic Development Board. And one of the technology pillars, as we call it, of the iHub is around additive manufacturing. And so the government of Singapore, as I said, has been a great partner, a great host for us. And so as companies are looking to perhaps expand into different geographies, into different territories, areas of the world that they don't have maybe current manufacturing in, I would say look for a host country who can help you in that regards. Again, we've had a presence in Singapore for decades, right? Whether it's on the legacy, Hamilton Sunstrand, way back a few previous mergers ago, or Goodrich Aerospace, or even Rockwell Collins, and now Collins Aerospace. We've had a presence in Singapore for a number of years, and so we do understand the local workforce. We understand all the amazing technology development that's going on in Singapore. And again, that relationship with the Singapore government has existed for quite some years. And we've just continued to expand upon it. But there are parts of the world that we would like to expand into. And again, we look for partners, whether it be local government or perhaps even host industries or host companies. And again, we found a lot of success in that regard. So it's always nice to have, a welcoming host, if you will, bringing us into a new part of the world.
But when setting up in a new part of the world, and you're bringing in, let's say, metal machines, what are the challenges for ensuring you have a safe environment for the metal machines? Is material powder handling an important aspect to solve for, or has that already been solved today pretty well?
I'm sorry, was that for me, Janet? Or for
both
Elena?
of you, yeah.
Elena, if you'd like to go first, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from the Fraunhofer point of view, obviously we do work also with, as not in the same dimension as Bill mentioned, but with companies that want to open new sites for additive and so on, also outside Germany. And obviously we consider concerning safety the whole manufacturing chain, right? As starting from the powder, explosion problems or storage conditions, handling, as you mentioned, Janet, and obviously also laser sources, electron beam constraints. I mean, you need to take care of the safety also concerning machines. Sometimes if it's a double robot system for DAD or whatever, you have lasers working there without maybe safety issues like in a conventional machine. Then you have obviously also for your, let's say, recycling of powder, depending, obviously for aerospace, you cannot always use the powder, reuse the powder, depending on the relevance of your part. So you need to take care of the powder, recycle it or use it in another approach. Then you will need to take care, as in some points we see people installing already machines for non-destructive testing. Could be an X-ray source, computer tomography. In that case, you need to consider also the use of X-rays and all that relevant issues. So you see that it's a quite huge approach, right? And from powder to final parts, maybe some in situ monitoring where you are using also external laser sources, whatever. It's a whole approach. So it's a lot of things you need to consider. And then obviously in every country, you may have another threshold, right, for powder concentration in the air, whatever. So you need to check this for sure before starting.
Anything you'd like to add there, Bill?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think Elena did an amazing job of making sure we understand that it's not just the powder, right? Certainly the powder is a key safety issue, right? Whether it's a reactive powder or non-reactive, protecting the workforce, protecting anybody who's going to be handling the part in its value stream, but then thinking about where that part continues on in its journey, right? And making sure that, downstream, whether that's, in the local plant site, again, for us, we'll use Singapore as the example again, whether that part's being used in Singapore to build up as part of a greater system, or we ship it to, any one of our number of global locations, making sure that we've really analyzed all aspects of the value stream to make sure that we design safety in not just to the part, but to your point, Janet, into the process, taking care that we protect anyone who might come in contact with that part. And so again, Elena said it so well, it's not just the powder, but it's all aspects of the value stream. And so we look quite hard at it. We've done a number of what we call 3P events. And so again, trying to make sure that we're in handling the part long before it ever gets put into service. We've protected anyone who will come in contact with that additively manufactured part.
And specific to handling waste and out of spec powder, Bill, someone wants to direct a question to you about that. How do you guys handle that at Collins?
Well, again, we're developing processes for that as we speak. We have some machines that have powder recirculation in it, and a lot of the industry partners, right? A lot of the printer OEMs are doing a great job at keeping powder contained and doing quality checks, sieving, and things like that. But obviously, powder does have to come out of the machine, whether it's in solid or powder form. Solid, obviously, being the part, as I'm referring to, and so we've got some experience at one of our sites about looking at powder reconditioning, right? Trying to capture that powder in a safe environment and then sending it out to be reconditioned. Again, one of the benefits of additive, right? Lowering the consumption, right? Lowering the amount of resources. But some parts will have to be scrapped. And again, that kind of ties back to knowing your local laws, right? Knowing what are the local regulations around, handling waste such as this, industrial waste. And so for the powder that does have to be scrapped, we're obviously working quite closely with local regulatory agencies to understand what those requirements are.
And Elena, are there any differences in how the local regulatory agencies in Europe handle materials that are worth shedding light on?
Yeah, I mean, I have the experience, maybe from my point of view, with my original country, Spain and Germany. This is completely different, and it's just Europe, right? So you need really to take a look inside. The regulations in Germany are quite strict concerning, especially reactive powder, reconditioning the powder as well. So you need to be sure also that your co-workers and so on get regular also, let's say, medical care concerning maybe the exposure to these powders, right? Even if you have the safety system, you need to take care also that they are tested regularly so that to avoid problems maybe in the future, starting with Inconel as a nickel-based powders, up to cancerous materials that can be more critical after some years, years later. So this is an issue. I might want to introduce also the issue that there is new work, also a lot of work in the last days on wire additive manufacturing, which might be, we know that there are some constraints there. We're working with wire, but it makes easier this problem that arise from the powder handling or the contact with powder. And then in this way, you can avoid, so you can avoid the handling, and you can work with more reactive materials in an easiest way that are relevant for aerospace, like titanium alloys or also aluminum alloys. So for some processes, I do see potential on the use of wire, DED or wire arc instead of powder, for instance, as a difference, let's say, or another approach.
Powder, but what about NDE, non-destructive testing? So we have a question from the audience from a while ago was, are there any specific global standards in additive manufacturing for safety evaluations through mechanical experiments and non-destructive tests? Elena, I see you nodding. Do you want to share?
Yeah. I mean, now we are involved as Fraunhofer in different projects where we are trying to establish these standards for non-destructive testing. I mean, non-destructive testing for additive is a quite new way of let's say certifying a part. I do know in Germany that in France and Germany, Airbus is doing a lot of work on this with the related agencies. Here in Germany is with DIN and the German International Norm System, but also with International Regulations Agency. And they did a great job here in the north of Germany, in Bremen and Hamburg, to introduce or to define these standards and these norms. From my point of view, from the things that I know, it's an open development. I mean, we do not have all the standards yet, but there is an improvement considering the last 5 years, mostly also motivated by the manufacturers that are pushing this use of non-destructive testing. So I do hope that in the next years we would see much more standards there to correlate this use of non-destructive testing and on additive parts.
Would you like to add there, Bill, or do you agree as well?
Yeah, no, I think Elena said it very well. I guess the only add I would have is I think it's going to be very critical for the industry to norm on some standards. There are some very expensive non-destructive testing methodologies. If you think about like a CT scan, can be quite expensive, quite time consuming, but in some cases extremely necessary. And so where that is necessary, then obviously, right, we and any industry partner will conform with that. However, there are times when we see people talking about CT scan when we think that there are other ways, probably either better or more efficient ways of handling some of that non-destructive testing. And so the sooner that the industry can norm on standards and how they apply with certain part families or certain categories of parts, I think the better off we all will be, because right now, CTing everything is probably just not realistic for our industry over the long term.
On that note, what would it take for us to reduce the testing? Do we need to be able to track more data up front and demonstrate process control which will equate to a part that meets the certification requirements? Or are we far away from that?
Well, Janet, I won't speak to reducing testing, because I think that can be maybe, I'll say we have to be careful with that, right? Because I think, whether it's a conventional part or an additive part, there are testing standards that need to occur. I guess, but you did touch on something that I'd like to highlight, and I think everyone who understands repeatability certainly is something that the additive industry is trying to get better at, right? Trying to demonstrate greater and greater capability. And so as we can, through demonstrated testing, through performance, et cetera, as we can really improve upon repeatability of the process, I think that goes a long way to making the industry more comfortable that the first part coming off of a machine, at the start of a day, if you will, is exactly the same as the 200th part coming off of a machine, whether that's in a conventional methodology or in an additive methodology. And when additive can get there, I think it goes a long way to just overall improving the comfort level of the industry and, again, the additive industry and the parts that it is producing.
And I also saw you nod a little bit there. Is there something you'd like to add to what Bill said about repeatability? Is there a different perspective you have?
Yeah, definitely for the industry would be a dream to reduce testing. That would be great. And there are some efforts from the academic point of view. Some people out there trying to correlate, let's say, in situ monitoring with CT data to see if by checking the defects that are already there and correlating it with anomalies during the process that can be easily seen with in situ monitoring, then you can skip the back front testing somehow, because you do see some anomalies already that are well known. So as far as I know, it's a lot of research out there, but not really an industrial solution for that. And I'm quite excited to see if in the future, maybe using artificial intelligence and the combination of these techniques, in situ monitoring and CT, for instance, we would see an incremental change in reducing the testing. I can imagine it's feasible to correlate some things, but I'm still curious if we're going to make it in the near future.
Do you see that as a trend too, Bill, or how AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. In situ monitoring has such huge potential, as Elena mentioned. And so, again, I know that a lot of the machine OEMs are working diligently on that, right, as a way to, as Elena said, reduce, back-end testing, right, drive repeatability, lower costs, et cetera. The question becomes, how reliable is that data, right? And again, how can we use that data, again, to ensure part conformity? So, yeah, we do see a lot of opportunity in hopefully in the near future with things like in situ monitoring.
Post-processing, someone was asking earlier is, what would you think is more important, NADCAP or AS9100 certification? When would you choose one or the other? Can someone shed some light on that?
Well, I'm not a quality expert, but I don't think you choose one or the other, right? AS9100 is the industry standard for quality, whether you're in a conventional manufacturing site or an additive manufacturing site. So that to me is the foundation. So I don't think you choose to not implement AS9100 if you want to be an aerospace industry supplier. So that's sort of the point there. NADCAP, like I said, NADCAP accreditation, as we know, is really around special processes. And as long as additive is going to be considered as a special process, again, speaking about laser powder bed is considered welding, then that becomes also necessary. So I don't think the question so much is, do you get to choose them or not, but really, how do they, work well together, right? How does becoming an AS9100 certified workplace make or give you the opportunity to achieve that NADCAP certification, maybe a little bit more easily, right? Because you've got that quality management system in place, you've got those quality standards in place as that foundation, as you then go pursue your NADCAP accreditation.
Thank you, Bill. I knew you'd be the right person to answer that. On another note, and Elena, I would love for you to start with this one, is there any structural part that already passed aviation agency certification process?
As far as I know, there are some parts already flying, or structural parts. Let's say there are some interesting parts you may have seen at some fairs where topology optimization has been done with Siemens NX, for instance. I think they are quite common to be seen in conventions and fairs, as far as I remember. So there are some parts out there. It's not a huge amount, but you can find some parts already.
Bill, any case studies, Bill, that you can share?
Yeah, I'm thinking, Janet, structural around that word. Again, as Elena mentioned, there are a number of great parts being produced and flying by a number of our, great industry partners, industry participants. Structural, it kind of depends on, I guess, how you define that. I'm not sure. Like in our business, right? We have a large landing gear business. I don't know that like we've seen landing gear type structural parts, but but I could be wrong. I certainly don't know every part. But again, I just know that it seems like in a very positive way, it seems like every day we hear about more and more parts being produced, via additive, and that can only benefit all of us in the industry, and that's great news. So whether it's structural or non-structural, the continued development of the industry every day when a part gets certified to go into actual flight is a good day in my opinion.
That's amazing. We hope to hear more great stories coming out from both parties in the future as well. There is someone that's asking a technical question here. Not sure if you guys can speak to this, but direct ink writing is an extrusion-based printing method. Is this technology expected to enter the industry? If so, what application does it fit best? Anyone have experience there? All right.
No, it's not the technology that I'm familiar with, I must say.
Well, for those that are familiar with it, feel free to put it in the chat box. You can find each other later on after the event. I know we're winding down to the last 3 minutes or so, but is there anything else that Elena and William, you want to share with this community today as they're on their journey to enable the aerospace sector, especially on the certification and safety process?
Bill, do you want to go ahead?
I was waiting for you, Elena. Sure. No, thank you. No, I think this has been a great Q&A session. So thank you to all the participants and some of the great questions. Again, some foundational work will always need to go into any manufacturing process, the quality standards, et cetera, demonstrating that your processes are in control. Some of just the building blocks or the foundational principles of manufacturing. Layer on top of that some of the challenges introduced by additive. And again, I come back to the need to communicate as early as possible with your customers, with your partners, with the regulatory agencies. Make sure that we understand exactly the types of data, the types of testing that you'll need to demonstrate or that the parts will go through. And I think you'll set yourself up for success over the long haul. But other than that, it's really just, focus on, whatever quality systems got you to where you are today in the industry as sort of the foundation. And I think, for the most part, certification should go hopefully relatively smooth.
Layering on top of that, Elena, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, maybe just a small point from the Fraunhofer perspective. We have been working on additive, as it was named, rapid prototyping for hundreds of years almost. I feel it's 100, it's not so long, but you know what I mean. And we are definitely completely thankful to aerospace and space industry, because they made, from my point of view, additive visible. So we do have a huge amount of projects. I think it's around 50% industrial projects coming from these areas. And I think they really broke the ice for other industry to get familiar with additive. So I think we are very excited about the future, about new alloys that are coming out, new materials, hybrid manufacturing, maybe, as you mentioned, new technologies coming up that have been asked before in the chat. We are very excited to see what the aerospace is going to do for additive and additive for aerospace in the future. And yeah, let's see where the trip goes.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elena and Bill, for joining us in this panel today. We covered so much today about certification and safety for additive manufacturing, starting with communication, getting all the right people in the room to discuss what are the criteria for bringing this part to market, and also keeping in mind the level of patience needed for the different programs, whether it's a small part that's on a plane to a part that Rolls-Royce is developing over the last 12 years. You've got to hold to keep your seat down and work together and trudge along, because we know that aerospace manufacturing has been the one, as Elena mentioned, paving the way for this space and bringing in a lot of the views on an eyesight and encouraging our industry to keep investing so that we can help take this further. And we also love how Bill and Elena are talking about the different standards, you know, how AS9100 is complementary with NADCAP and how that can help support you in creating an infrastructure so that you can support the aerospace sector. And if you are expanding into a different location, take a look at what the government has for manufacturing sector or for additive manufacturing and seeing how they can help support you. To add to that, we also covered today safety. Powder handling is obviously really important, and making sure that you have the infrastructure and policies in place so that employees are well taken care of. But also beyond powder handling, we've also got X-ray and a lot of other types of situations to consider for ensuring employee safety as well. And it was awesome hearing about what we discussed on all the costs related to bringing a certified part to market. It is expensive, it takes a long time, but maybe there is a hopeful future where if we're able to demonstrate repeatability across the entire value chain, this might be able to help cut off time and maybe cost for bringing parts to market and getting that certified and qualified. So looking into the future, both parties were excited about what AI might be able to bring to the table, how in situ monitoring data with CT data or other types of quality information can help us enable that. So we hope all the startups and organizations investing in this sector do push this forward because we need it. And finally, as we're closing, Bill also reminded us we're working on the foundational work and reminding ourselves that communication is key, not only at the beginning, but throughout the entire process. So thank you for that. And thanks, Elena, for also sharing how we can keep putting additive manufacturing at the forefront, and also thanking the aerospace industry for taking a step forward. So thanks, Bill, and the entire Collins Aerospace and Raytheon team for doing that. All right. On that note, we'll like to close the panel, and we hope that everyone enjoys the rest of this virtual event. Thank you, 3D Natives.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, everyone.
You're great. Bye-bye.